Welcome to a special edition of Cars on Call. This is a 3 episode series about the Cobra, the AC Shelby Cobra. I'm a huge enthusiast, have been for a very long time. I'm building a car. I've got with me Adams Hudson. He is one of our regular hosts on Cars on Call. Car connoisseur, fund of knowledge, car collector, and honorary trauma surgeon. How you doing, Adams?
I'm good. I hope no trauma patients are needing me.
And then we've got Bobby Crumpley joining us. He's a former guest on Cars on Call as well. He's a huge Ford enthusiast. He has owned a Cobra replica, many Ford Mustangs as well. And glad to have you back on the show again, Bobby.
Thank you. Great to be here, especially talk about Fords, God's
And
car.
what? Yeah, exactly. So the first episode today, we're going to just kind of give an introduction of the 427 Cobra. And then we'll talk a little about Carroll Shelby. Second episode, we'll look at the different replica manufacturers. And then the final episode, we'll talk about engine selection if you do choose to buy a Cobra or start with a replica. I'm going to start with a replica. So much has been said about Carroll Shelby, written. Everybody's heard the stories. I don't want to go long into it, but he won Le Mans in 1959, driving for Aston Martin. Famously, in his overalls, he would race as well. This was a different time in racing where people were racing sports cars. It was a big deal all across the country and the world. He had a heart condition and he had to stop racing at angina, had to take aspirin.
Nitroglycerin.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, nitroglycerin, exactly. So he wanted
Since
to
I'm a
get
trauma surgeon, I knew that.
Right.
Now you're an honorary internal medicine doctor as well.
Right, right.
It was nitro. I always think of a heart attacks, you got to take aspirin first. That's what they do now. But back then you got nitroglycerin for angina. So he started, he wanted to continue kind of making race cars and supporting a racing team. So a lot of lore and legend around this, but that's where, how it all started. Any other comments you guys want to make about that? There's a lot to be said, but.
Yeah, I think when you see what he did, as a promoter and building the cars and trying to do something, that was really something. But when you look at what he was able to do as a manager of a race team and win Le Mans, that had never been done by an American before or since. Not as a driver, but as a team owner or, team principal, I guess you'd call it if you're thinking the way that we describe it now. And so, yeah, he was a very talented man. Had his flaws like all of us, but he, what a legacy, what he's left for us.
I agree, and it's just such a colorful character. You put him on the big screen in the Ford versus Ferrari movie, and if you've not seen it, folks, watch that movie and watch it with your spouse, your kids, because it's a clean movie and it's very well told. But I'm telling you, as large as they say that they make life out of Hollywood characters, Carroll Shelby's character was probably almost underdone in that movie because he really lived big, and it's just unbelievable.
Yeah,
agreed.
So, you have to ask the question you kind of ask yourself is, why are we talking about Cobras? Why are they so popular? A lot has to do with the legend, but think about it. This car was designed in 1960, actually late 50s with the AC, then early into the 60s, early part of the 60s was modified from the 289 cars to the 427 car. And it does, anybody that sees one of these cars, it strikes you emotionally deep in the gut, like what a cool looking car. So Adams, I want you to talk a little bit more because you design, you draw, you're an artist, you love design. I want you to just talk about why you think the Cobra today, 70 years, is still and will be into the future. I mean, almost over 6 years, is still a pertinent design, a vehicle which people still love.
Well, and that's a very good intro to this, because that's part of why it still lives today. And right up there you can see on the screen, it's a study in timelessness. That's a car that really, you look at some vintage cars, that resto mods or whatever, and you see them at auction, they're very well done and very tastefully done. But you can go, oh, that's from the 50s, that's from the 60s, that's from the 70s. You look at a well done Cobra, and it's just like, it doesn't matter what year it is. And so they're elemental, not ornamental, meaning exactly what it says. It's not a whole bunch of decoration and needless ornamentation on the car to make it what it is. It's minimalist in all the right ways. It's not so underdone that you look at it and go, man, they left some stuff off. And I do believe it's the most enduringly appealing shape that we've ever seen. And yeah, I come from the Ferrari world, you know, and I'm sort of maybe a tiny bit of a Euro snob, though I greatly appreciate what America has done for the automobile, and no less so than in any car than in the Cobra. And the next little bullet point.
I want to do so. I'm sorry. One thing here. You're talking about the design. So Ron Randall at Metamorphosis painted my car, and he redid the fenders to make a narrow hip car. And he says these cars are incredibly difficult to paint and get right because there is not a single flat surface on a Cobra.
No.
Not
Wow.
a single. There is not. It is nothing but curves.
And that's a dude who would know right there.
Yep. Bob,
That's
you have any
terrific.
comments on that?
Oh, it's absolutely right. And that's one of the things that makes them so beautiful with the right color on them, is because of all the shapes and the curves and different light. It's just so many different looks. It's just beauty. It's voluptuousness. I guess is what drives us crazy.
That's right.
You
Nice
know,
curves. We all are. We all like
that's
curves.
what we like.
We all like curves, and
Yeah.
the front does it and the rear does it. And one other little minor thing before we go on to the next bullet point is that you guys are talking about what we all sort of associate as a shape that came out in the mid-late 60s. You know, AC had been making this car in the late 50s, and they ran out of an engine contract. You know, the AC Ace, the AC Asica, the AC Greyhound, all those cars, which AC originally stood for auto carriers. That'll tell you how old that dang nameplate is. But they were running out of the ability to put engines in them. So they have this beautiful design that's a really effective car. And by the way, the Bristol engine is really a BMW motor before BMW became what it is now. And they just had an empty engine bay. And so you talk about stars crossing. Carroll Shelby shows up. They got a car with no motor. He's got a motor and no car. So it has worked.
Yeah. The timing was perfect. And
Perfect.
it's the long hood, the short rear, two-seat, like whether it's an early 212 Ferrari or a 507 BMW, an MGA, any of those beautiful cars. Or an E-Type even. Long nose, short tail, two seats, curvy. It's perfect.
I think Bobby,
we could have stopped right there.
He just hit our next bullet point, where I'm not seeing it up there because that's exactly what. Isn't there a next one? Help me.
Yep. There we go.
Well, there's more beyond that, but the mechanical simplicity I think is very appealing too. You know, it's one thing to take an older, incredibly complicated car, like you'll see a replica of a Lancia Stratos, for example.
Right.
And those you can put, a GTV6 motor, one of the Busso V6s in, and you're talking about a 4-cam, 4-valve motor that's very difficult to find because they only made them for an abbreviated period, and you've got all these complicated bits and pieces. There's just something about the Cobra that's very appealing to the I'll go ahead and genderize this. I mean, men just love it. It makes the right noises. It's easy enough to work on. I'm not trying to minimize how difficult some of them can be to time, et cetera, especially a camera motor. But it's just something very appealing and very raw. It's like the whole reason people gather around a campfire. It's just elemental. And I think that's what a Cobra is. And then the next thing, what do we got here? Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. The long hood, short deck, exactly what Bobby said. And then, the adaptable to side pipes, roll bar, hood scoot, et cetera. You can change this car. You can sort of personalize it. You don't want to go too far, which is what the next bullet point will be. But you can do things to it. Yes, they had roll bars and they didn't have roll bars. Some had hood scoops, some did not. And I think that is also part of their appeal. Is that you can do different things to them to personalize them. However, you can go too far as well.
I like your first line there, brutish muscularity without over-exaggeration. And for me, that's the street Cobra, without the side pipes, without the roll bar, without the hood scoop. It's what's under the hood.
Yeah, we talked about being adaptable to that. If you go to, say, like the Cobra Museum in Boulder, where you have so many of the original cars, there's I think there's a couple Daytona coupes in there, and CSX 2000s there, and you have 2345, the FIE cars there, and it can be just a simple gentleman's car, or you can be a race car that was winning everything it ran in, and it adapted to all of that. And then, if you look back at TV in the mid 60s, you had Honey West driving her white Cobra with her Ocelot in the passenger seat.
Okay.
Her Ocelot Bruce. Yeah. It was all those things. And so there was so much, the appeal was so wide, whether you wanted to be was it a true race car or something? Turn it. No, this car won races. It was spectacular for that, for particularly being an old design. It just works so well. And so whatever your interest is, you're still drawn towards it. Whether it's, a guy like me likes a street untouched car, or you want just a total blown out race car, whatever, you still are drawn to it. And it's simple mechanicals, and it's just effective, lightweight, and a brute.
Absolutely. And I had forgotten about her and the Ocelot. That's probably the genesis of what we now refer to as a cougar. But nonetheless, she did good at that. And here's where a Cobra design can go too far. And I think the good thing about what I'm about to reference here is Stephan's going to do an upcoming episode. So make sure that you bookmark and save this and take a look at it on the next one. But the proportional limit tampering is crucial, perhaps criminal, meaning that the exact design cues that we've talked about, the whole palette and the language of what makes a Cobra design appealing today, is that you can change it within a certain number of parameters, but then there's a certain group that you can exceed, like the door cut length and windshield rake. And there's other rakes and angles that if you change them just a little bit, a person could look at it who knows nothing about design, knows nothing about proportion, would not consider themselves artistic at all, could look at it and go, something's off there. And what it is that's being off is that the proportions have now been misshapen and taken to an extreme that was really not within the design language. The grill aperture and shape is a biggie. And again, Stephan's going to cover that in another episode. And almost most importantly, and we will see it in this episode, the fender wheel well and wheel relationship is crucial. It's what we all kind of refer to as stance in the broadest sense. Some that sit too high or sit too low on occasion. And we'll look at examples of those. But all that stuff, if you stay within a certain bit of the design language, it's good. You step outside and something's just off. It's like the otherwise attractive lady who has had that one too many plastic surgery, and you go, ooh, should have stopped, want to go, but you kind of can't go back. And that's what I think the Cobra design is, and in all the good things, and then the things that we'll see in the derivative language of some designs that maybe step too far.
Yep. That'll be in our episode where we talk about the different replica manufacturers. Well, I think, in our age group, I think we all three of us share a sentinel moment where we got snake bit probably the exact same weekend in this country. And that was 1976, the movie Gumball Rally. Very famous Viking blue 427 Street Cobra. Michael Sarrazin was Michael Bannon, and Nicholas Pryor was Professor Samuel Graves. And Gumball Rally was just a great movie, but that was the very first time I'd ever seen a Cobra on TV. I didn't see a real one for almost, till just only like 10 years ago. So that's what you guys do. Is that where you were got the snake bite with the Cobra?
It was for me. I was 11 years old when that movie came out. I went to the Trade
Oh,
Winds
now
Theater.
You're just bragging.
I went to Trade Winds Theater in Texas City, Texas, and saw that. And even though at that age I was in love with Mustangs already, but it was after that it was nothing but Cobras and Shelby Mustangs. I had posters all over my walls. Just infatuation from that point on in 1976 till to this minute today. It just did it. It's raced against a real Daytona Spider. You couldn't want a better car, but yet the Cobra is one that did it for me.
Yep. And I went to that. I was 16. I had just gotten my license. I had a 1960 Austin Haley bug-eyed Sprite with a a whopping 1248 front engine motor. Now that was a hopped up motor. That's a big block.
That's a big, yeah, that's a
Or
big
the
block
948.
for a bug-eyed Sprite. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's an upgrade.
from the 948. And a friend of mine had a MGA. Now we weren't as old as those cars were, so let the record reflect that. However, that's what we could afford at the time. When we left that movie theater, I was in the Cobra and he was in the Daytona. And it was just, I don't know, that movie changed me so much. It made me appreciate both the Cobra and the Daytona. Quite frankly, I'd never seen a Ferrari. I probably had never seen a Ferrari, much less a Daytona. But
Yeah, I
that
hadn't seen
movie
those cars.
set me off. That was such a great movie.
Here's a great. This is, I love the shot where they're racing down and through LA. But you can see, look at this picture. You can see that if you're a very tall person, the top of your head is going to be above the windshield. I mean, these
Oh,
cars were,
absolutely.
they're difficult to fit in. They're small cars. So I was at Rolex Monterey Motorsports during Car Week and I was there I went in 2012. It was the 50th anniversary of the AC Shelby Cobra. It was the honored mark, and I think they had over 45 Cobras on the track at one time going around. But this is CX 4243. This is 3243, which was in the movie Gumball Rally. This is
Wow.
the original car from the movie. There were a couple cars in the movie, but this is the real one. And I got to walk around this car, look at it, and it just brought back so many memories. And they
Wow.
had it there, and it went out on the track, and it's just such a beautiful car. So I mentioned earlier that no two Cobras are the same, and it has a lot to do with the history of the Cobra, which I'll go into some kind of the numbers. But it's really rare that you're going to find a truly original unmolested car because what happened was they had the competition cars, the race cars. He couldn't sell all those. So then he made the semi-competition cars, then he made the street cars. And we're not talking about a whole bunch of cars here. I'll go into the numbers in a minute. But then the people that got the street cars were like, you know what? I think it looks pretty cool with side pipes. So they throw side pipes and they throw a hood scoop, they throw a roll bar. So the cars the original Cobras that are worth money today are number one are the competition cars, and then are the unmolested cars. And then so a car that has not been altered. And a lot of these cars went from street to SCs back to streets. Um, so we're going to go a little bit over the numbers so that about Cobras as we talk about that. So the original Cobra was it was a 260 motor put in the 289. They had transverse leaf springs. They call them the buggy suspension. Then they had the FIA, the racing Cobras, and then to make the car handle better, they had the Salisbury rear end, and they put coilover springs and independent rear, and made the car a whole lot better for racing. So that's what the car had to get bigger. That's why it became the 427 nomenclature because he also put a bigger motor in it. So the original cars, there were only 55 competition Cobras made for racing. The most famous probably is a 98 driven by Ken Miles, which is in the movie. Carroll Shelby had a hard time selling these. These were expensive. And he couldn't sell them all. So he said, you know what, I got to do something to sell them. So he made what's called the semi-competition car. And that's where it's basically the race competition car, but it had a regular windshield on it. It still had the side pipes. Um, and so he had these, and then he still couldn't sell all those. So then he had some road cars. So there's some streets. So really, you're only talking about, there's only about, depending on the numbers, around 320, 318 or so original Cobra 427s out there. But think how many
Wait,
replicas are out there now.
Steph, let me intervene here, and I'm looking at the numbers, and you guys know the topic and like super intimately, but I'm looking down and where it says 260 road cars, you're not talking about 260 cubic inch, you're talking about
260 cars.
260 big
60.
block cars that he made into SCs.
Well, yeah, he
No.
made them into SCs and street versions.
Okay.
So there were 348 cars total. That's the accepted number. I don't know if that was
Okay.
exactly right, but that's the accepted number. But so there were 50 that were going to be competition, or 55, and couldn't sell all those. There just weren't buyers for 55 of them. So they turned them into SCs, and then you had the remaining cars were all built as street cars. And so any of them are there's some differences amongst those. Typically the ones that are 3,200 serial number
Right.
were 428 cars.
Here we go, right here, Bobby.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and then the later ones, 3300 plus, were 427. They went back to 427. Supposedly, he could buy the 428s from Ford for $250 versus the $750 it was for a 427. Now, it could have been a supply problem. It could have been a money issue. Who knows? Everybody argues about that. No one knows.
Right.
But, you know, a 428 is a fine engine as well.
So I got
Maybe
all the
even better
numbers
for the
here for
street.
the cars, all the numbers on the for the cars for people like to dive in the details. But basically, the 427s you got one of three engines. You got a Cinder oiler, which had two 4 barrels, or you could have had the true side oiler, or you got the 428 engine. And I think so those are the three engines you could get in a Cobra, and Carroll Shelby just kept the 427 badge on all of them. Some people
Right.
weren't happy they got the 428, so they swapped it out for a 427 side oiler. Some center oiler people swapped them out for the side oiler because the side oiler is, you know, it's got its own history as a fantastic motor. But not a lot of cars were ever built, but there's a lot of replicas out there. A few other numbers for geeks. This is not all cars had the oil cooler scoop on the front. I like the cars without it, but they're very hard to find. And then taillights. Some had rectangular taillights and some had round taillights. So you can see in the replica world, you can kind of do what you'd like to do, and you can still be within the norms.
And Steph, I gotta talk from the novice perspective of which I would be in this discussion. The oil cooler scoop is the scoop that's under the grill, the little smaller intake area under the grill.
Correct, where they have an oil cooler. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Right.
And some of them with the scoop had no oil cooler. They were
Right.
just a scoop, but
It's
no
just a
oil
scoop.
cooler.
Right.
Yeah. So so it changed a lot. Now, I'm a huge fan of what's called the narrow hip 427 Cobras. And in the Cobra world, people will argue about these cars back and forth all day long as to whether or not they're the nicer car or the preferable car. They shouldn't even be there. They should be fixed. But what happened was um, they couldn't get the Halliburton magnesium wheels because they're for racing. They're being used. So Brock Yates designed the new Sunburst wheel.
Peter
And
Brock.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I've done that before myself.
Typo. Yeah. Thank you for the correction. I'll fix that. And then a lot of
What
people,
did you say? Did you say Peter Brock? Yeah, Peter Brock.
Peter Brock.
Peter
Yeah,
Brock.
okay,
Yeah. I put, I just immediately in my brain typed Brock Yates, but it's
That's
Peter
okay.
Brock designed it.
Well, you were thinking of the big Brock cars. Yeah.
So a lot of people describe the narrow hip cars, which I'll show you some pictures of, as a 427 in the front and a 289 in the back, because it had the narrow fenders. And there's 33 cars. These are my very favorite. And and this is the European version of the narrow hip cars. This is the AC 289 Sports. So this is a 427 in the front without the oil scoop, with the narrow fenders in the back. And these were the COX cars that were for the European Cobras. And they put small blocks in these. And this to me is really my favorite of the 427 Cobra variations. Is
And this
really
was part of Carroll Shelby's agreement with Brian Anglis.
that he could right.
He could still
make
put the AC badge on front instead of the Cobra badge, blah, blah, all that.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's worth noting. Me interrupting for one sec, Steph. The Ned Scudder, who's been the Cobra guy for SAC forever, that's a car he owns is a 289 Sports. You know,
I
he's
love
had
that car.
He's had 427, the best 427 SC. It was the last one sold. I think it's CSX 3047, if I remember the number right. Just some spectacular cars, but that's the car he owns now. It's just they're just perfect.
They don't overheat. They drive much better.
Yeah.
They're not widow makers, and it's
Right.
perfect. But I'll talk about in the engine episode. I just wouldn't put a small block in a car this is a 427 unless you're doing this car. Then that is correct.
Sure.
So here's why I like the narrow hip cars. So this is CSX 3178. This is Carroll Shelby's car, sold for $5.4 million in 2021. And if you look here, this is a great angle, and I'm gonna show you. If you look at the rear fender, so this is what Peter Pertante at ERA calls the dually look, except for it's missing a set of tires in the back. The fender's so big, it should have either 2 tires in there, but it only has one. And this is not a look that I don't like this look. Now, a lot of people, I've watched YouTube videos, owners of these Cobras, they like this look. For me, it just, it, it's the fitment atoms, you know, that you talked about.
It just I'm telling you, I'm looking at this and all I can see in that photograph is that fender to tire gap.
Right.
Just staring at it. It's like if there's a rock hits your windshield, it's all you can see. That's all I can see right there. Yeah, it looks like it needs a 10-inch rear wheel or something.
Right, exactly. Because that's a 7.5-inch rim in the back of this car. So here's another view of it. This is actually CSX 3252, which is the Peter Portante at ERA's first Cobra that he took the molds and the dimensions off to make the current ERA Cobra. Now this is an original Cobra here, and this is a narrow hip car, and you can see the fitment there is just absolutely perfect.
Perfect.
And that is the look that I like.
Yep. And that car oddly has side exit exhaust, but not side pipes.
Yes,
Correct?
this is CSX 3142, and this is an original car, and he's got the Cobra 100. Been invited. He did the annual Cobra run. So this is an original car, but you can see it was originally a street car with a narrow hip car that had a roll bar added to it, a hood scoop, as well as the side pipes, and he converted from the Sunburst wheels to Halliburton wheels. So this is a street car that's been modified to look more like a comp SC car. But I saw this car at Monterey, and I'm like, that's the fender that I want on my Cobra if I build it.
Was that the one? That was the one where you
This
said,
is
all right,
a V car.
Yeah,
This is the car I saw at Monterey, and I'm like, that's it. That's the fender I've been searching for. And here is CSX. This is 3134. This is the car that the measurements were taken off of that Ron Randall at Metamorphosis made an ERA tribute to this car right here. And he got measurements off of this car. And this is what my car will have. My car will have this fenders and look at the CSX 3134, which is the only unmolested street car out there. It has never had a hood scoop. It's never had a roll bar. The only thing that's been done is it's got the different wheels in the Sunburst.
Wow.
So,
the only unmolested one. Okay.
That's what they say.
I believe you.
There's only 33 cars, and this one, has never, hadn't had any plastic surgery. So that's kind of, where I am. Then I thought I had more slides there. I got to get it to switch. But I'm going to pull up Bobby's car. I'm going to stop screen share. You guys can mention if you got any comments on that while I get my slides done here.
Well, Bobby is. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
well, I was going to say, as he mentioned his moment where he said, "Oh, that's the one." Did you have a moment where you said, "All right, I'm building me a Cobra"?
I did, and CSX 3130 is another narrow hip car. It's part of the Weaver collection. Tremendous restoration on the car, just absolutely beautiful black car. But when I looked at doing the modifications to make it a narrow hip car, it was a lot to do. So I kind of cheated.
And it's expensive, I'm telling you. I did it.
Yeah. Well, anything you do is expensive. It's just a matter of how bad it's going to hurt. But so when I did my car, what I did was I had ERA build custom length half shafts for the rear that push those 7.5-inch wheels out just a little bit to fill up some of that rear quarter panel.
Wow.
And then and bigger tires on the back, but it's 7.5-inch all the way around.
And is that what we're looking at here?
Yes.
So that is the same body as what Stephan showed with the dually look, but you had the half shaft extended in order to fill out that wheel well?
Yes.
I got to ask a dumb question. Why didn't everybody do that? It looks terrific.
Thank you. And some do, some don't. Some like the narrow look. I think because when you see the narrow look or the dually look, you're most likely looking at a real Cobra, so they like that, particularly if you're trying to replicate it. But to me, that was just the perfect thing.
Yeah,
doing it this way. and it was just a simple change you had to make. And like I say, I think if I remember right, it's 225 on the front, 245s on the rear, and it just fit perfectly.
Well, I don't want to make this show 3 hours long on the technicalities, but did it alter your suspension geometry enough that you'd ever notice?
I wouldn't notice.
Okay.
And, you know, maybe if it was on the track, maybe I would, but no, for just cruising around, no. And I have to think it would help it, you know, just pushing the rear tires.
Yeah,
out, so.
yeah, just because it's wider. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, it sure looks good. I'm telling you, aesthetically, that was the right move.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring up some pictures here. This is my car currently with the narrow hips. And I'm going to show you here. You can look at the back and you can see the narrow fender. I also had the front fenders modified. I want to scroll down here and find a picture of the rear end of the car. There's a good picture. Here we go. If you look at this picture right here, you can see how just the curves are much simpler in the back. It doesn't flare out.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll go down further and I'll show you what the car looked before, what the rear end of the car looked like before it got molested. So here you can see how much the flare stuck out, right?
Yeah.
And then the left side, you can see where it's gone.
Oh, okay. I thought that maybe the angle of the photo was off a little bit. Yeah, I can see.
The angle's a little bit off, but you can still see big difference. It's
Big
not
difference.
perfectly straight on, but a big difference. And then here you can see how it's just smooth.
Yep.
So that's what I've done with my car build so far. So I think putting it all together, this is just an amazing car that still reaches down into your gut when you see one, when you hear one. Beautiful design, timeless design, as you mentioned, Adams, and testament to Carroll Shelby for what he did was, I mean, Bobby, do you have any idea how many replicas might be out there on the streets? It's insane.
It's in the five figures. I've seen different numbers speculated on. Well over 10,000. Who knows what it is? Factory 5, I think, has sold 10,000 cars. So ERA has sold close to 1,000. Well, I guess maybe sold more than 1,000 because what number is your car?
I'm 853. Yeah, and that doesn't include.
And then that includes 289 cars. So
yep.
So it's in the tens of thousands.
So I mean, Carroll Shelby was pissed about it for a long time because people were making money off his cars, and he finally settled with Superformance to let them license his name. I don't think he picked it. We can talk about that later, but I don't think he picked the right one to be a true homage to his car in terms of the details. But it's a fantastic car. They're a blast to drive. They're scary to drive. But I'm looking forward to finally getting mine done. And I think that was a pretty nice introduction to the Cobras. You guys have any other comments you want to make on them?
I got one minor little color commentary, again, coming from the outside looking in. I remember very well, like we were talking about that movie, The Gumball Rally, talking about how that sort of set us off on a little bit of a Cobra path. And many of us had not ever seen one. We'd never seen one driven in anger. Maybe we'd seen one like stopped somewhere. I remember seeing them in racing way back when, but I was at such a distance, it didn't even matter. And then about 1978, 79, there was a guy, and you guys could fill in some blanks. There was something called an ARNTZ, ARNTZ.
Yeah.
Replica.
Yes, he worked for Shelby.
Yeah, he worked for Shelby.
That was that not a built car, or was that a kit like you could pick?
It was a kit. It's known as the first kit, or it's recognized as the first kit.
Yep. But you think about that, I mean, like 1978-ish, I'm probably off on the year. The Cobra was not even cold in the annals of old car history by the time somebody went, wow, that needs to come back. I mean, that car was only, 10 years old by the time ARNTZ said, hey, we need to start replicating these. And yeah, probably there was a copyright, or I think they call that when you're copying a shape of something. So the trade dress laws were probably not even hardly written because people weren't doing anything called retro in the day, and so can you comment on that a little? Because that seemed like a dang early time for somebody to go, man, I already missed the Cobra enough to rebuild one.
If you look at the market on the cars, and I'll go back to following like the ads in the back of Road and Track, the classified marketplace back there.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they went from 25,000 or 427 car to 75,000 in the period of a couple of years.
Yep.
But when you look what it would cost to build a replica back in the 80s, the mid 80s, early 80s, you're probably going to spend 50 to 75% of what you could buy a real car for.
Oh, yeah.
Here
And
you
now
go,
it's, you know,
6 to 13,000 for the kit.
How did you find that? That's unbelievable. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was, you know, I can remember that car. And Bobby, you mentioned something else of note. I think for all those who are like watching this episode are kind of into the lore, into a little bit of the nerdship of it. The guy who I singularly credit or discredit for having run the prices up and then popularity was a guy, if my memory is right, Jim Southard in Atlanta was a speculator on those cars. Is that ringing a bell?
It does. I remember seeing the ads.
Yep. He
And
ran.
you had him. You had a guy in Arizona. There were a few of them, and there were stories that they were trading the cars back and forth to raise the market. Who knows if that's true or
Yeah,
not?
I heard that same thing. You know, they would advertise a car for 30 grand one month, next month it'd be 40, and the next month it'd be 50, and
Right.
it'd be one guy and another guy and another guy, and it'd be the same dang car.
But maybe that wasn't true because the value just kept on going.
It kept on
You know,
going.
so who knows?
Yeah, yeah. If they were fanning fake flames, it would have died out with them. But I
Of
think
course, yeah, you can only keep that going so long.
that's right. That's right. And the desirability of the car is super strong. We wouldn't even be talking about it right now.
Right.
And Steph, you're building a good one, man. I love every spec you've chosen.
Yeah, we'll talk about the engine and stuff later. And so, well, Bobby built a beautiful car that he sold on Bring a Trailer, and I think you got the highest price ever paid for an ERA Street. Fabulous car, fantastic build, lots of nice details, true original, true to the original, I should say. Your car had the stance, it had the look, it had the details, and so hats off to you. Going to build another one? Or are you done? One and done?
Probably done with those. I mean, who knows what's going to come in the future? Right now, I've got so many other cars I'm working on. Once I can get back to work, once my garage is built, my new garage. But between me and my son and his cars, we've got plenty to do. And he still has a Cobra and a ERA GT40. So we've got plenty to work on, and it keeps us going. There's always something that needs to be done to them.
Very good. All right, gentlemen. Well, we'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and close this out. Thanks for joining me tonight, talking about something I can talk all day long about Cobras and look at pictures. It's never ending, especially when you're building one, you're just going through all the details. So, so thanks for listening in, listeners. This next episode, can't promise when it'll be out. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, in the next month or so, we'll get the other 2 episodes done. So remember to like, listen, subscribe, leave some comments, and we'll see you next episode.